second of two candidate forums for office for this November 5th election that is being brought to you by the Citizen and Cayuga Community College. I'm your moderator, Guy Cosentino. We are delighted to have in the studio two of the candidates who will be on the ballot on November 5th. As you may know, because of all the television ads you've been seeing, you get to vote for President, 1/3 of the United States Senate, including a senator from the state of New York. All the members of the House of Representatives are up, and in New York we get to vote for all the members of the New York State Legislature, 63 members of the Senate, and 150 members of the Assembly. For Cayuga County, we have currently 3 Assembly members, one of which is in the studio today, but for those of you who may not know how Cayuga County is divided up, the 120th Assembly District is for the northern part of Cayuga County, and it is represented by Assembly Minority Leader Will Barkley, who has no opponent this November and will be serving his constituents in January as well. The new 131st Assembly District that starts in Aurelius and Fleming and heads south to 13 towns in Cayuga County will again be represented in January by current Republican Assemblyman Jeff Galligan, who is also not got an opponent this year, so he will be reelected. What we do have in the studio are the two candidates who are in a competitive race here in Cayuga County, and that is for the 126th Assembly District that is represented currently by Assemblyman John Lemondes, who was elected in 2020 and is seeking re-election in a district that includes the city of Auburn and the towns of Brutus, Cato, Conquest, Mentz, Owasco, Senate, and Troop, as well as towns of the town of Skaneateles and Spafford in Onondaga County. Assemblyman Lemondes is being challenged by Democrat Ian Phillips. And tonight we have both Mr. Lemondes and Mr. Phillips in the studio for the next hour. We also have with us Robert Harding, the Citizens Government and Public Policy reporter, who will be asking questions of both the candidates. Our candidates are in the order of a draw that they chose their seats in. Assemblyman John Lemondes, who's on the Republican and Conservative lines, and Ian Phillips, who is on the Democratic and Working Families Party line. I want to welcome you both again to the studio. Prior to taping, we drew lots. You have a 2-minute opening statement, 2-minute closings. The person who's in the first seat will make the first opening statement and then close out at the end of Mr. Harding's questions. Mr. Harding can ask questions of either of you or individually, and we'll go back and forth and give you all equal time on this. So we'll start with Assemblyman John Lemondes. He is on the Republican and Conservative line. Welcome back to the studio.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cosentino, Mr. Harding, Mr. Phillips, students at CCC for filming. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope that everyone understands the significance of this election and what I bring to you. I have loyally and honorably represented you for 4 years, and I am looking forward to doing so for the next 2. What I bring to you is tenacity, willingness to do your business, the ability to do so honorably, and to do so with the experience as a senior military officer, having served in both Afghanistan and Iraq for 27 years, as well as a business leader serving in the high-tech industry locally and a business owner. I hope that you'll accept that these skills are necessary for our government, and that experience is relevant in all that we do. The last thing that we need is having people in office that have neither the relevant experience, nor the temperament, nor the honor, integrity, and values to represent you in the way that you deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman. We'll now hear from Ian Phillips. Welcome back to the studio. Mr. Phillips is on the Democratic and Working Families line, and you have 2 minutes as well.
Thanks so much, Guy. So, as Guy mentioned, my name is Ian Phillips. I moved back to my hometown of Auburn 12 years ago, and 6 years ago I decided to run for school board because what I saw was happening to my hometown district. We were laying off teachers, we had closed my beloved West Middle School, and I thought I could make a difference in fixing the lack of state aid that was coming to our district. We were in the bottom 1% of per pupil funding from the state. And in that time, we accomplished a lot. We got lower class sizes. We got additional aid from Senator Mannion so that we could bring in our school resource officer program to all of our schools. We lowered class sizes. We restored music and art programs that are so vital, and we are the only district in the state that has before and after school programs. We did that through advocacy, bringing people together, bringing students, their family members, community members, and faculty to meet with their legislators and get things accomplished. In March of 2023, I brought a group of students up to the Capitol. We met with all of our elected officials, and finally with Assemblyman Lemondes. We had students who spoke about mental health crises, about school funding, and his response to that was not to listen, but to respond with really kind of extreme talking points. And I left that meeting thinking that we deserved better representation. There's a lot that I admire about Assemblyman Lemondes, but unfortunately this role has brought out his worst traits. His inability to listen, his failure to do research and ignore facts that don't conform with his narrow ideology, and making excuses and blaming others for his failure to deliver for our district. There's really clear contrasts in this race, so I'm excited to discuss those over the next hour. And I think one of the clearest contrasts are between rhetoric and results. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. We'll now turn to Robert Harding, again, the Government and Public Policy reporter for The Citizen, who has been doing yeoman's work for us for the last couple of years. Welcome back to the studio.
Thanks, Guy. Good to be here. Wanted to start with a topic that's important to this district, and that is water quality. A few of the Finger Lakes are in the 126th district, including Owasco Lake, which provides drinking water to 45,000 Cayuga County residents. For several years, there have been concerns about the impact of harmful algal blooms on the lakes and drinking water supplies. While the state has provided funding and taken some action to address these concerns, local officials believe more needs to be done to combat the problem. As the 126th district's representative, what state-level actions would you support to address these water quality concerns?
Assemblyman, you'll have 2 minutes on this, and then we'll turn to Mr. Phillips.
Sure. Thank you for the question. That's a significant area of concern for us, and there are several things that I would do. First, I want to address the fact that the only person in this room that has professional credentials and experience in water quality is me. This problem is geologic in nature. It didn't start last year. It won't be fixed in the next legislative cycle. There's a lot to do. The most important thing is to understand the data, and you can't make data do something that it doesn't indicate. That's a major challenge with anything that's scientific that you're undertaking. I have worked closely as a board member on the Soil and Water Conservation District in Onondaga County, where I worked there for several years, being very in depth with all of the soil and water conservation projects throughout the county. And I've taken that knowledge and just recently, as a matter of fact, toured many of the opportunities that Soil and Water is doing in this county. The data for understanding the problem specific to Owasco Lake has to be continued to be measured. The measurements that are done, the research that has been done is all good, but it needs more. You can't force results without understanding what you're dealing with, otherwise you're wasting precious money. Additionally, this is something that needs, as I have been successful in doing, in getting, if possible, federal funding to help with this. If you remember, Onondaga Lake in Onondaga County became a Superfund site, and that's what made the difference in cleaning that lake up. It didn't happen in a day, a week, a year. It took 20 plus years, and it is significantly cleaner today than it was when we were children. Now, that's not the same problem that we have with Owasco Lake. Nonetheless, its challenges mean that I'm going to continue getting resources. I got $750,000 in excess of the ask for the budget. Talk about results, Mr. Phillips, for FLOPA. And that was a huge win for the local water quality endeavors. I'm going to continue working to get resources to solve the problem scientifically and support it all the way. The notion that that Republicans don't care about water quality and air quality and conservation is really a myth that has to be dispelled, and I want to be the leader that demonstrates that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Phillips, you'll have 2 minutes on this as well.
Yeah, Republicans absolutely do care about water quality, and that's why Supervisor Ed Wagner, who's a longtime Republican, has endorsed me, because he knows I'm going to deliver on this issue in the way and the incumbent has not. You know, he's mentioned a lot of his accomplishments, and I applaud him for those. What he didn't mention is delivering. We can't wait 20 years, as has been suggested. You know, here in Auburn, we had toxins in our water just a week ago, right? So we need to treat this like the emergency that it is. As far as waiting on additional data, all the stakeholders met for over 6 years to develop new watershed rules that are 40 years out of date. Everyone was at the table. Assemblyman Lemondes initially sent a letter supporting them, and then a few months later backed out and changed his mind and didn't support them. And then when the state rejected them, I was the one siding with local officials, calling out the state. Governor Hochul and Assemblyman Lemondes alike have failed us on this issue, and we need a champion for the Finger Lakes.
Thank you. Assemblyman, you'll have 1 minute to respond.
Sure. Let me go to technical data for a minute. Part of the challenge here is that the SRP rate, soluble phosphate, is below the action level. So you can't make something worse than it is. That's why the state ruled the way that it did. That's why we have agencies that do cognizant research and provide opportunities for people to understand what exactly is going on and what's happening to their watershed. This water is something that there's a lot of data, and the fact of the matter is that more data needs to be gathered. This is not going to be solved immediately. And it depends on, there are so many factors. I'll give one, and that is in low water years, the turbidity increases because of
Go ahead, finish your sentence.
because of wave and wind action. And so those sediments that have built in the lake over thousands of years get activated and can feed algal blooms in an accelerated manner that don't happen in other years. So the notion that Mr. Phillips is going to solve this by himself is indicative of his lack of understanding of the depth of the problem and the resources it will take to fix in the long term. This is not something that will be solved in the next legislative session. This is something that needs teamwork, it needs a leader, and it needs people that understand technically water.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Mr. Phillips, before you start, because we had a timekeeping issue, you will get 1.5 minutes for your response, just as the Assemblyman.
Great, thanks. So the start of the Assemblyman's response was, he said the phosphate levels were below the action levels and there was nothing that we can do. The EPA rejected the state's response to not adding Owasco Lake to the endangered water bodies list. So we'll start there, and that's why Auburn and Owasco have sued the state. Of course nothing gets done on its own, and that's why I've been meeting with the Skaneateles Lake Association, the Owasco Lake Association. I'm a member of Save Owasco Now who's been working with this. I've been meeting with all the local officials who've been on the ground doing this work, and they repeatedly say that our Assemblyman is absent on this issue. So it's good to talk about, it's going to take a while. Absolutely, every challenging problem takes a while, but we need to treat this like the emergency it is. There's no time to wait for more data. We have a crisis right now on Owasco Lake, on Skaneateles Lake, Atisco Lake. This is a Finger Lakes district, and we need a Finger Lakes champion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Lemondes, you'll have 1 minute as well.
Thank you. Mr. Phillips, if you're going to lie, I'm going to call you out for it. Your lack of integrity is it's demonstrated in your entire career, every aspect that you've ever worked professionally. Ladies and gentlemen, just for the record, I or someone in my office has been involved in nearly every Skaneateles Lake Association meeting, and Owasco Lake Association meetings. We haven't made every one over the last 4 years, but most of them. And so I just want to tell you that I am going to continue representing you with honor, integrity, tenacity, and the ability to be honest with you. I would never do what you just witnessed here. Thank you.
Mr. Phillips, you'll have 1 minute.
Yeah, I mean,
and then I'm going to move on.
It's pretty laughable that someone who has proven repeatedly, right? The Citizen did a fact check. He's basing his entire campaign on a student loan fee and forged a document to try to say that it has something to do with taxes, would talk about honesty, right? This is the problem with our current representative. He can't answer the questions, so then he resorts to personal attacks. We need a champion for the Finger Lakes who's going to listen to people and develop solutions with the people on the ground, and I'll be that Assemblyman.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Harding.
I wanted to shift gears to, excuse me, to housing. It's one of the factors driving the homelessness problem in our area, and the cost of rent is rising, and for some it has proven to be too much. While there are some affordable housing options, it's evident there aren't enough, and with Micron coming, this problem must be addressed. What's the best way to ensure there are affordable housing options while encouraging developers to provide this type of housing?
Mr. Phillips, you'll have 2 minutes.
Yeah, this is a really critical issue, and it's come up over and over as I've talked to my neighbors. I spoke to a woman on the west end of Auburn a couple weeks ago, and when she moved here 8 years ago, she was paying $660 in rent, and today she's paying $1,200 in rent. When I've talked to experts on the housing issue, they describe the market as being part of 3 segments, right? There's a low end, an affordable end. There's an end for middle class homes and home ownership, and then there's a market rate end. And we have supply problems across the board. One of the things that I would like to see us do to increase the supply and to get more people in homes here in Central New York is for jobs where we have shortages in the public space. Think police officers, corrections officers, nurses, teachers, that we have critical shortages here in Central New York. Low and no interest loans so that people can afford to buy homes here in Central New York. If we can kind of both stem the tide on these critical shortage areas and get people to put roots down here in Central New York, that's going to be a benefit to everyone. And then in places that are so-called pro-housing communities, cutting through the red tape that comes with development so that developers can build quicker and with less cost.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Assemblyman, you'll have 2 minutes on this issue of housing and its cost locally.
Thank you. Critical issue. Just in Onondaga and Cayuga counties alone, homelessness is up 75%. And of that figure, roughly 50% of that homelessness is families that have never been homeless before. The factors driving that are the increased costs of rent. And number one of the biggest reasons driving that, and what we need to do to fix this or to help fix this, it's the 26,000 units that have been taken offline because the laws passed by the Democratic majority in this state under Kathy Hochul and in both chambers of our state legislature, the Assembly and the Senate, have made it so impossible for landlords and property owners to have any rights at all that are reasonable in comparison to other states. They've taken their units offline. This is what's driving, one of the factors that's driving rents sky high. 26,000 units locally have been taken offline, ladies and gentlemen, because property owners are not willing to take the risk because they can't evict people in a timely fashion. They can't hold them accountable for destroying their properties, and it oftentimes takes years to evict someone. So that's one thing that can be done and must be fixed in order to bring those units back online. Additional are some zoning changes that allowing people, if they elect to, property owners, to add property dwelling units to their existing properties. And again, I say very importantly, if they elect to, that would help solve the problem as well. This problem must be addressed fiscally, also with affordable loan options for people, and it will only get exacerbated if we do nothing with Micron coming in both counties and the surrounding area. This will impact surrounding counties as well.
Thank you. All right, we're going to turn to Mr. Harding again, and just so we are aware of how we're running timing here, we will hold up a sign at 1.5 minutes with a yellow sign will be held up by Tessa, our student, and at 2 minutes a white sign with an X, which will tell you your time is up. Mr. Harding.
I wanted to shift to one of our largest employers here in Cayuga County, and that's the Department of Corrections and Community Supervision. And an issue that's affecting those who work there and those who are held there is the violence in these correctional facilities. It's at an all-time high. As of October 1st, there have been a record 2,191 assaults on incarcerated individuals and 1,617 assaults on staff, which is close to breaking the previous record set just last year. What should the state legislature's role be in addressing this problem, which is creating an unsafe environment for incarcerated individuals and staff in prisons?
Assemblyman Lemondes, you'll have 2 minutes on this subject.
Thank you for bringing this up. This is critical. There are many factors involved in this. One of them is the egregious policy by Governor Hochul of allowing more prisons to be closed on only 90 days notice. No other business in the world would do this. The government doesn't do that. And that in and of itself is a huge mistreatment of our corrections officers. Additionally, all of the bail reform laws are exacerbating our public safety infrastructure. Corrections officers community and the police community are so stressed, their families are impacted, and this is because of the laws that have been changed by the supermajority. Ladies and gentlemen, if crime hasn't touched you in this state, which we now live in the most dangerous New York state we've ever lived in, it may very well. Crime is hitting our communities in places it never has before. So some of the things that we need to do, Robert, to address this immediately are to hold criminals accountable for their actions, open more prisons, stop consolidating the most dangerous prisoners and incarcerated individuals into an ever smaller pool of prisons. That's what's happening here. We just had several guards attacked 5 weeks ago. It was horrendous. I've watched the film. I have done everything trying to help our corrections community and will continue to do so. They have my loyalty, and I want everyone to know that this is a problem for all New Yorkers. And specific things that we can do are address the bail reform laws, all of them. Bail reform itself, clean slate, raise the age, etc. They all have to be addressed. They all have to be strengthened. And most importantly, above all, is accountability for actions.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Mr. Phillips, you'll have 2 minutes on this issue of corrections and violence.
Yeah, so, growing up in Auburn, I've got so many friends and family members that work in one correction facility or another over the years. So safety of those individuals is really paramount. They're my friends and family members. I had the opportunity a few months ago to tour Auburn Prison for the first time in my 40 years, even though I've lived in the shadow of the prison with Augie Smith and Rick Vanacore, and see the conditions that they work in every day, and that their head needs to be on a swivel at all times. I think it's important that when I am in the assembly, in the Democratic majority, that I bring my colleagues up to tour the Auburn prison and other facilities so that they can see what our corrections officers are dealing with. Furthermore, we heard a lot about the problems. I think there's a solution here to the problem of not enough notice on prison closures, which was, I think, the initial part of the question. The prison in Auburn, one wing is completely being renovated right now. It's costing the state millions and millions of dollars to do. It's been over the course of quite a while now. I believe that we should have a bill that for every $1 million we spent on a renovation, that it's at least a year before a closure can be implemented. So if it's $20 million renovation, which some of these renovations are extremely expensive, that facility can't be taken offline within the next 20 years. The state makes all kinds of silly decisions. They renovate a facility and then close it the next year. We have to put in solutions to the problems that we see, not just complain about the problems that we see. And that's one of the solutions in talking with COs and others that I would provide.
All right, thank you, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Lemondes, you'll have 1 minute to follow up.
Thank you. One of the solutions that I've actually began to implement is the removal of name tags from corrections officers within the prison and replacement with badge numbers. And this came to me from multiple tours, mostly from female corrections officers whose families can get targeted and harassed by prisoners. So I firmly believe that actions like that, sincere actions that come from understanding the problem. I've been in that prison several times, 3 or 4 to be exact, and been a part of many law enforcement, pro-law enforcement rallies. I will continue doing so and continue backing them and continue doing things for their benefit, for their safety, and for their families.
Yeah,
You'll have 1 minute.
Just very quickly, I think that's a wonderful idea to remove the name tags to provide some safety for our COs. I'm not aware that Assemblyman Lemondes passed that bill. If he did so, then congratulations to him. I haven't seen that bill be passed, but if he's passed that and I'm unaware, good on him.
Okay. Mr. Harding, you're back up.
I'm going to have a question for each of the candidates, individual candidates.
The first candidate, well, you can go with whatever route you want to go, and I'll get us back on
All
track.
right, I'll start with Mr. Phillips because I think it is his turn. So
It is.
But Mr. Phillips, you've been employed as a political organizer for New York State United Teachers, which is an influential statewide union. If elected to the state legislature, you will have a say in state educational policy and vote on budget bills that provide educational funding to school districts across New York, including here in the 126th. How will you ensure that you are voting in the best interests of your constituents, of your district, and not NYSUTs as a state legislator?
Okay, before you answer that question, let me just get the ground rules set so you're both aware. Mr. Phillips will have 2 minutes to answer the question. Mr. Lemondes, if he wishes to respond, will have 1 minute, and Mr. Phillips will then have 1 minute, and then we are moving on to the next question. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
Okay. Yeah, so obviously, should I be elected, I'm on unpaid leave now. Should I be elected, I would not be employed by New York State United Teachers. This would be my only job. I'm proud of the work that the teachers union in our state does, and being a part of that, fighting for good learning and working conditions in our schools. I think the teachers union has been the strongest voice standing up to some of the cuts that both Governor Cuomo and Governor Hochul has proposed. I worked there because I believed in their mission as a former teacher myself. There's certainly things that I don't agree with my employer on now. I don't believe in mayoral control in New York City, for example, and I know the union does support that, but I think New York City has repeatedly elected mayors that don't have any idea what to do with education. So I'll put educator voices first. And parent voices first in any educational decisions that I have, and my own experience as a former teacher, will really come into play first and foremost.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Assemblyman, do you want to have anything to say on this issue?
I do.
You'll have 1 minute.
Thank you. As was noted in the debate with the Post-Standard, Mr. Phillips stated that he was in absolute favor of Proposition 1, which will remove parental rights from parents in our school system. And he just said he was for parents rights. You can't have it both ways, Mr. Phillips. You have to be able to make a decision. And ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know I will do that on your behalf. I am for parental rights. I am against Proposition 1. Never again will a natural-born female, woman, girl be successful in girls' athletics if Proposition 1 is passed. I do not believe in the giving of state taxpayer-collected funding to illegal migrants, nor do I believe in giving illegal migrants legal rights in this state. They are illegal. We have a legal immigration system. They can come here that way, not illegally. This is a very, very in-depth topic,
Thank you,
and we don't have time.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Mr. Phillips, you'll have 1 minute to respond.
I mean, the question was on education. Somehow we got to Prop 1. Unfortunately, the Assemblyman has a fundamental misunderstanding of what Prop 1 does. There's no change in state law. It simply puts it into the Constitution. So there's no change in what would happen in our schools or anywhere. You know, parental rights are not going to be violated. Any of the other things that he's mentioned are not going to be violated with Prop 1. You know, bringing it back to education, this is the biggest item in the New York State budget. We have to make sure that we're doing that spending efficiently. And as somebody who was on the school board of a district that was in the bottom 1% of state aid, and whose district contains number of districts who were going to be cut in last year's budget, but then were flat funded at a time when inflation is on the rise, we need somebody who's going to treat education as a priority and not bring up all kinds of side issues to distract from it.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Before we go to Mr. Harding, who has another question for Mr. Lemondes, just a quick note to our viewers. We're a little over halfway through our forum for the 126th Assembly District. In the studio with us today are Assemblyman John Lemondes, who's running for re-election. He's on the Republican and Conservative lines. He's being challenged by Ian Phillips, who's on the Democratic and Working Families Party line. They're being asked questions by the public policy and government reporter for The Citizen, Robert Harding. Mr. Harding.
We'll get back to education aid and Prop 1 later, but Assemblyman Lemondes.
Sure.
In May, you announced that you would not introduce legislation allowing the city of Auburn to charge a hotel tax. Yet a review of your legislative records shows that you introduced 3 bills, all of which were signed into law by Governor Hochul, allowing the village of Weedsport and the town and village of Skaneateles to charge hotel taxes. A further look at your voting record shows that while you have voted against 37 hotel tax bills in 4 years, you supported 13 others. Just weeks after announcing your opposition to Auburn's hotel tax, you voted for a bill to allow the city of Binghamton to charge a similar tax. How do you explain your votes for Binghamton's tax and sponsorship of the bills for Skaneateles and Weedsport while opposing Auburn's pursuit of a similar tax?
Sure. Thank you for the question. It's a great question. First, there's different circumstances of each one. The first, let me talk about Weedsport. Weedsport was a result of the redistricting. I did not represent Weedsport in my first term. That was under Brian Mankelo. The leaders that represented Weedsport all unanimously agreed that they wanted that tax. Redistricting occurred. It was then under my representation when this was done, and they all came to me and asked me to implement that. So all of that work, anything that happened with respect to Weedsport was all done prior to my representing them. That was a request from them that I carry through on the work that they had done. Function of redistricting with regard to the census, it occurs every 10 years. These things, nothing you can do about that. Secondly, Skaneateles. I was surprised. I have, for both Auburn and Skaneateles, I required before voting that everyone that wanted to had 5 means of contacting me to discuss their opinion. U.S. snail mail, email, phone call, coming into the office, and ultimately culminating in a public meeting in both places. I was very shocked, to be honest with you, that again in Skaneateles, and there was unanimous consent among Republicans and Democrats in both that they wanted. From many Republicans that I've known for a long time, The amount of support was significantly higher than those that didn't want it, which was just the opposite in Auburn. So that's how those votes came out the way that they did. And I will continue. Again, I didn't want to vote for my impression of Skaneateles was that I would not do that. But being a leader, you have to put your personal views aside oftentimes and represent the people that elected you in the manner that they wish you to.
Okay. Mr. Phillips, do you wish to chime in on this?
Yes.
You have 1 minute.
Yeah, so, the only form of government when people are asked that people like are their local elected officials. It's the only one when people are asked. And the local elected officials of Auburn were unanimous in wanting this occupancy fee established. Just like the places, just like Skaneateles, just like Weedsport. They happen to be Democrats, sure. But they were unanimous in their support for this. We in Auburn have to pay a Lemondes fee of $500,000 a year in additional taxes. And I wanted to let you know what that money goes to, right? When we have to pay our local taxes, that pays for our police department, our fire department. Over half of Auburn's budget is dedicated to public safety. So when Assemblyman Lemondes rejects that support, that's coming off of the backs of our public safety workers.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Mr. Lemondes, you have 1 minute if you wish to respond.
I do. Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want everybody to understand that what Mr. Phillips was not privy to is the people that emailed me, called me, came to my office, snail mailed me, or that were at the meeting. So, all of the 5 sources of information that people were allowed to discuss their opinion with me about. And I arrived at the solution that I thought was the best for the community. I did not want to hurt low-income people coming to stay in the hotels to visit their family in the prison. That $5 or $10 or $15 means a lot to them. And also, I did not want to drive business away, which many businesses have the ability, with the volume that they bring to Auburn, to take that business. If the rate gets to a point where they don't want it, have the ability to bring that business to surrounding communities, which would have hurt Auburn.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Mr. Harding, we'll move on.
Well, as promised, we'll get to education aid. Foundation aid is the base state funding provided to school districts, including those in the 126th. The Rockefeller Institute is conducting a study that will include ideas for how to update the foundation aid formula. As a state legislator, how would you balance the need to update this outdated formula with ensuring that school districts like Auburn don't lose significant amounts of state funding?
Okay. I'm taking those single questions out of the mix. We'll start going back on the cycle again. Mr. Phillips, you have 2 minutes on foundation aid.
Can we hold the timer up and
yes,
then keep
if we
it
can
up?
have the timer.
Like when you're doing it.
When you hold
sorry.
up the 30 seconds, could
Thank
you
you.
please keep the 30 seconds up until you flip it to the stop? Okay. We'll start your time right now.
Okay. Yeah, so this is probably the issue that I am most familiar with. In fixing the foundation aid formula, what has happened to districts like Auburn, for example, is it's gotten so out of whack. They're using 20-year-old data to determine need for school districts. They're using 20-year-old data to determine student counts in many cases, and then they kind of adjust it on the back end. And what you have is you have some districts that are spending close to $30,000 or more per pupil, and then you have some districts that are spending less than 20 in the teens, $16,000, $17,000 a year. And those are vast disparities. It means much bigger class sizes. It means less resources for things like STEM, social emotional needs. Everything is wrong and out of whack with this foundation aid formula. So it really needs to be stripped down and started over. And then what we need is a predictable as a former school board member, we need a predictable income, so that people can make long-term plans. The state 1 year gives a big increase and the next year wants to cut it back. That's unpredictable, and people can't plan in any type of responsible way to fix the foundation aid formula. So we need we need folks that understand this, and people that are going to be in the room as a former school board member advocating for changes that are going to benefit our local school districts.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. We'll now hear from John Lemondes on this issue of school aid formula. You'll have 2 minutes.
Thank you. This is something that I have worked in a bipartisan manner with Senator Mannion as well as Dr. Timms in trying to understand what the problem is and why we have this problem. This problem exists and persists. It must be changed. It must be updated, but it's not so easy to just do. The reason it relies on the 2000 census data, one of the reasons, is because the population locally was higher then. The population of Cayuga County now is 7% less than it was then. So updating that formula immediately would result, or could result, depending on how the variables were tweaked, in less money than the school currently has. So leaving this as it is, we all know, doesn't solve the problem. It must be updated. It needs to be updated with professionals that understand it, and it needs to be done so quickly, not having if it were so simple, it would have been done already. It hasn't been done in 20 years. And so this is why I worked with Senator Mannion and with Dr. Timms in trying to do this. And it was very difficult. We did not do it in one cycle or 2 cycles. This requires diligence, and it requires the willingness to change it. And I don't believe the willingness to actually change it is there with a Democrat-controlled majority.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Mr. Phillips, you'll have 1 minute.
The willingness to change it, from me, is certainly there. And unlike Assemblyman Lemondes, during budget season, I'm going to be in the room advocating for changes. And, as far as working with Senator Mannion, a former educator like myself, I have an extremely close relationship with Senator Mannion. He's never once mentioned working on any education-related issue with the Assemblyman. So we can say whatever we want, but I think that anybody who knows myself and knows Senator Mannion knows that as a former educator, he doesn't need any advice from somebody who thinks that public schools should be subjected to charters and all these other things that would drain resources from our local public schools.
Assemblyman, you'll have 1 minute to respond, and then we'll move on to Mr. Harding.
Thank you. With all of the changes involved in education, the indoctrination of our children, the challenges that they have, giving parents choice. Choice is fundamentally American. Choice allows people to make the right decision for the right reason for their families. This is not something that anyone would disagree with. And Mr. Phillips, I'll take you up on that. If John Mannion says that I never worked with him and Dr. Timms, then they're lying. Okay, so I'll take you up on that. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to call a spade where I see one, and I would never bring something to you that I didn't do in a breach of integrity. The person to my right here has nothing but swirl around him in everything he's done. He even lied in the newspaper about the debate, knowing that this debate was scheduled.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Mr. Phillips, I'm going to give you 1 minute, then I'll give Mr. Lemondes a minute.
So you'll notice the first thing he said was public schools indoctrinating kids, right? That's what he believes. When we were trying to reopen schools in places like Auburn, which are very underfunded during COVID, and people were pushing back and fighting to open the schools, and rightly so, and then later, because they were told some of this propaganda that books needed to be banned, and people came in trying to remove books from our school library, I go and look up in the Assemblyman's record, he's got a bill that would help people ban books that he's introduced. Thank goodness it didn't pass. But, you know, rhetoric like that is completely out of touch. When people tried to ban a book in our Auburn library, that book had been on our shelves for over a year and a half and hadn't been checked out once, right? So we're talking about make-believe issues instead of real problems like chronic absenteeism, like cell phones in schools, and other nonsense.
Mr. Lemondes, you'll have 1 minute, and then hopefully we'll move on.
Thank you. Talking about out of touch, the parents that I talk to, and especially many of the board members that have served with you, Mr. Phillips, you couldn't be any more disingenuous in your response. That's all.
Mr. Harding.
I want to ask about Micron because they're moving forward with plans to build several large chip fabs in Onondaga County, and that project will certainly benefit the entire region. This is a bit open for both of you, but what do you think is the biggest issue that must be tackled to ensure Micron's investment in Central New York is a success?
Assemblyman Lemondes, you're up for 2 minutes.
Sure. First of all, I want to see that just as much as you do and as much as everybody watching does. I think that will be one of the best things that's happened to Central New York for all of the surrounding counties in a long, long time. That doesn't save our state, but it saves Central New York. It'll provide a much-needed stimulus that we haven't had. As you know, we're the highest outmigrating state for 3 years in a row. Our population is fleeing left and right. But to specifically answer your questions, we have to make sure that the environmental standards are met. Right now, there's a delay, as you know. I don't know if that's where your question was going. There's a delay on the groundbreaking because of the bats. And those things have to be checked. They have to be met. We have to come again to solutions, and the people working on those will arrive at that solution. And hopefully, the project doesn't get canceled. This is the largest economic stimulus that has happened in Central New York, and I really want to see it happen because we are talking about the opportunity for several generations here that we haven't had in several generations.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Mr. Phillips, you have 2 minutes on this issue of Micron and the biggest worry that's out there for you.
Yeah, I agree with the Assemblyman. This is an incredible opportunity that our leaders at every level worked on to bring to fruition. So we have to get it across the finish line. I think one of the things that we need to do is both at the K-12 level and at the higher education level, we have to prepare our workforce for those jobs, not only at Micron, but for the secondary industries. And not only kids, right, preparing them, but our adult workforce, so that the folks that live here can benefit from those good jobs. I also want to see a lot of site development for secondary industries. We have some closed down industrial sites that so many of my friends' parents worked at in Auburn growing up, and we have them across this district. And making sure that we have the infrastructure in place to get those secondary industries online. You know, it's not going to be the multi-billion-dollar investment that Micron is, but if we can get one of those secondary industries at the old Bombardier site or any of these, I've spoken to Lysander Supervisor Kevin Road about the industrial park up there that needs some work and some state infrastructure upgrades. We need to make sure that that work is happening now so that when those start to come online, we're prepared for that.
Mr. Lemondes, you'll have 1 minute.
Thank you. One of the biggest things that we need to do is incentivize our young people to stay. This will help. As you know, SUNY and CUNY's numbers, their enrollment has been, it's 100,000 students short over the last 10 years. We are exporting more 18-year-old intellectual capital to other states than probably any other state. We need to keep those students at home to grow that technical base, just like it was when I was a kid, with all of the defense work that we've done here. And that's one of the things that I'm working on, is trying to leveraging my background in defense procurement in the high-tech industry here locally, where I built Marine Corps and shipborne radar platforms I want to help bring that high-tech industry back, because that's what made this area what it was going back 30 years and before. The defense sector was critical.
All right, thank you. Mr. Phillips, you'll have 1 minute.
Yeah, so in addition to kind of the workforce development pieces and infrastructure that we need to get online, I think that we have a critical issue with affordability here in Central New York. You can see it in all the towns that are surrounding where Micron is going. Housing prices and all property values are kind of shooting through the roof. So if we want folks to be here for the next generation, and I share that hope with Assemblyman Lemondes, we need to make it more affordable. So we need to be able to get people into homes, and that's with low and no interest loans for those down payments. And it's also with things like childcare, right? Like we've done in Auburn, in bringing free before and after school care to young families who are putting down roots. So affordability is critical, because as more wealthy areas of the country, I know we've experienced here in Central New York, people from the city coming up and buying homes with cash. We don't want our neighbors to be pushed out when Micron comes in.
Thank you. Mr. Harding, one very short question. We'll give each of the candidates a minute.
Yeah, we'll close with a topic that came up earlier, which is Proposition 1. This is the proposed constitutional amendment that would enshrine abortion rights and anti-discrimination measures into the Constitution. Simply put, will you vote for it or against it?
And you'll each have 1 minute on this, and I believe, Mr. Phillips, you're up first.
Yeah, I will proudly support the Equal Rights Amendment. I think if you're undecided on this issue, you should look at the Times-Union did a great story on what it would and would not do, and I think the Citizen reprinted that article. I'm an Auburn kid. This is the home of Harriet Tubman, William Seward, Francis Seward, Lucretia Mott Osborne, so many signatories of the Seneca Rights Convention. And at every stage, when equal rights were proposed, there were people who were bringing up hyperbole to scare us and divide us and think that we as Americans shouldn't all work together in concert with one another. The ERA has been discussed since my mother was in high school. It is finally time to put this in the New York State Constitution, and it will send a clear message that Central New York is the home of equal rights, and I'm proud to vote for it.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Assemblyman, you'll have 1 minute as well.
Sure. I will vote against it emphatically because of the things that it will put into the state constitution. I don't believe that New York State resident taxpayer collected dollars should be diverted to illegal people coming across our border. Don't forget, we are a border state. We share a northern border that people are coming across every day, as well as coming across in Niagara and the Buffalo area. Again, one of the biggest things in this measure is the impact it will have on girls' sports. A natural-born girl will never again take first place in any sport, any athletic event, if this is passed. This has nothing to do with equal rights. That's a misnomer, and it takes away from the intent of what it's actually trying to do. I cannot support it in good conscience. Having 3 sisters, 9 nieces, 2 daughters, I care about women's rights, ladies and gentlemen. I've got a lot of women that I can ask in my family about this anytime I need advice.
Thank you, Assemblyman. Mr. Phillips, you'll have 30 seconds.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that supporters want enshrined, because there's a national abortion ban on the table, is protection for equal rights for folks due to their pregnancy outcomes, right? And make no mistake, choice and people's control of their own bodily autonomy is on the ballot here with this proposition. And putting those protections that are already in state law in the state constitution is one way we can stand up to those that would like to bring that national abortion ban to New York State.
Mr. Lemondes, you'll have 30 seconds, and then we're going to go to closing statements.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, the abortion rights issue has has been codified in New York and protected since 1970. That's not being infringed upon in any way, shape, or form. In fact, in the last 2 years, women's abortion rights in this state have gotten nothing but stronger. So that's not on the ballot, and I don't want to diffuse the issues. I can't believe we didn't talk about the economy. I can't believe we didn't talk about his role in ACORN, a subversive organization.
Thank you, Mr. Lemondes. We'll now go to closing statements. You want to add anything into those 2 minutes, you can do that, but we do have a time constraint here. So we'll start with closing statements, as we had said at the beginning. We flipped the order on the end. Mr. Phillips, who's on the Democratic and Working Families Party line, you have 2 minutes for your closing statement.
Yeah, so I'll just address the latest kind of personal attack, and then I'll get into my closing statement. 2009 called, and they want their conspiracy theory back. I moved back here to my hometown because I love it here. I deeply love it here. And I had so many teachers, Sue Cunliffe, Bill Kennedy, Jerry Martin, who taught me that our democracy is our greatest inheritance as an American. And what I see in 2024 with this completely unhinged rhetoric and an inability to listen to people that disagree with you is a real disservice to that spirit. Our duty to protect that inheritance and turn it over to the next generation better than we found it is at stake when we vote on November 5th. I'm a geriatric millennial, I'm told, and so I grew up on Mr. Rogers. And whenever there was a problem, his mother told him to look for the helpers, not the people who complain, but the people who are trying to make a difference. The most joyful part of this experience of running for office is meeting all of those helpers who are building community throughout our district. People who are trying to clean up the lakes, improve their schools, build infrastructure, serve their communities in local office, and meeting those people has been one of the most joyful experiences of my life. I believe fundamentally that the job of an assembly person is to help those helpers succeed, to listen and learn from them, and then deliver results. And that's what I'll do as your next assemblyman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. We'll now hear from Assemblyman John Lemondes, who's running for re-election. He's on the Republican and conservative lines. You have 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Phillips, I couldn't agree with you more about protecting our democracy and our inheritance of it, which is exactly what I spent 27 years of my adult life doing in places like Iraq and Afghanistan. I would gather that that was a little tougher duty than working for ACORN as the Pennsylvania State Director, which is a subversive organization. I can't believe we didn't talk about that. You have somebody running for state office that served in a subversive organization that he tried to hide. It's not anywhere in his record. And he skated through without people knowing that. Ladies and gentlemen, I will give you honesty, integrity, hard work, and I'll continue to listen to you as I have in all of the public forums that I've conducted, all of those that I will conduct, and want you to know that I simply look forward as how I can shape the future of not only my children, but yours as well. That's what this is about. That's why I put my skin in the game. Skin in the game is a great measure of someone's commitment, how far they've gone, how far they'll go, what they'll do, how much they care about something. And I want you to know that I've had skin in the game. I'm a business owner. I was born and raised here, served 27 years in the military, and have your best interests at heart, and will continue to do so honorably. Thank you.
Thank you, Assemblyman, and thank you both for taking the last hour to share your views with the public. We know campaigns can be rough and tumble, and you have about 2 weeks to go, so good luck on the rest of the campaign trail. I want to thank Mr. Harding, as usual, for being here for his thoughtful questions. We'll see him back here in the spring if there's an Auburn Large School District Forum or any primaries that may pop up. We also want to thank you, for the public, for taking the time over the last hour to hear the candidates for the 126th Assembly District. We encourage you to go out voting on November 5th or start early voting, which I believe starts this Saturday on the 26th. The Citizen will have this and other forums that we have been doing, as well as interviews, on their website at auburnpub.com, as well as you can go to the college's media unit, Media at Cayuga on YouTube, to watch these as well. Quick 2 programming notes for you. We will be back on Tuesday. We had hoped to bring you the candidates for the 24th Congressional District. We will have in the studio for a special Inside Government interview Congressman Brandon Williams, who is the Republican incumbent, since his opponent, Senator John Mannion, a Democrat, has not agreed to any of the dates that were suggested by us over the last several months. Under the rules put in place in 2006, if one candidate agrees to participate in a forum and their opponent does not, we give that candidate equal time here in the studio, and we'll be doing so this Thursday with Congressman Williams. We'll be back to regular programming next week. Jeff Digert, the city manager, will be on Inside Government to give us a city update. We've been looking forward to that for some time. And a guest that we have been trying to get back in here for almost a year and a half have been former Congressman James T. Walsh and Andy Zepp of the Finger Lakes Land Trust to talk about the work they are doing, some of which you've been reading Mr. Harding writing stories about in the last several weeks. So we'll be back with them. In the meantime, have a good night. We'll see you back here in the studio on Thursday. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cayuga Community College and The Citizen.